Russia's advance in the city of Bakhmut has seemingly stalled despite Moscow's claims that Russian forces had taken control. That assessment coming from the Washington-based Institute for the Study of War. Joining us this morning to talk more about the battle, former U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, John Herbst. Good morning to you. So the battle in Bakhmut has been bloody. There have been losses on both sides. What's the significance of this city, of this region right now, and hearing that Ukraine is able once again to hold off the Russian forces there?
This is one more symbol of the defeat of Moscow's military in Ukraine. The Russians Putin set mid-December as the date for Russia to have taken Bakhmut. And here we are in the middle of March, and it still has not happened. Even if Russia were to take Bakhmut, all it does is open the roads to secondary towns like Kramatorsk and Slavyansk, which were under Russia's control early in their war in Ukraine in 2014, but the Ukrainians took back by the end of that year. And according to Ukrainian statistics, which I can't quite confirm, but they've been reliable in the past, 7 Russian soldiers are dying around Bakhmut for every 1 Ukrainian. So it's been a massive killing field for the Russian military.
Right, and we're hearing that the Wagner Group is suffering significant losses, this mercenary group. A smart strategy by Ukraine to whittle down those forces there?
If those stats are accurate, which I think they are, then it's very smart.
And then what's next? If they're able to deplete the Wagner Group and those forces on the front lines, what do we know about Russia's military might, that people they have waiting in the wings?
Well, the Russians have they say, up to 90% of their military personnel in Ukraine right now. They would have to do another mobilization, which was politically very painful for Putin last fall. So I don't think he wants to do that. The Ukrainians are planning a counteroffensive. I think they will strike once the ground hardens in the early spring. If we gave Ukraine everything they're asking for, longer range artillery, fighter jets, I think Ukraine would have a spectacularly successful counteroffensive. But even without that, Ukraine may still make major gains come May, June, July.
Right. On Friday, I spoke with a member of Ukraine's parliament, Yevgenia Kravchuk, and she alluded to the fact that Ukraine is planning an offensive. Where do you think Ukraine will focus its attention next?
They will choose the point of weakness as they survey Moscow's defenses. The place where they can make a spectacular move would be in the south. But again, they'll determine what's the place they can make the safest strong move, and they'll choose that. And we don't know what that is.
What do you make of the Kremlin's recent statements playing down the prospect of any peace, saying once again that military action is the only way?
Well, Putin, despite all the defeats his military has suffered in Ukraine, still has his maximalist objectives, which essentially is to seize political control of Ukraine, at least east of the Dnipro River, which would make up over 2/3 of the country. And again, that's despite the fact his military is in no position to impose that. So until there's a realistic understanding in the Kremlin of what Moscow can achieve, they will continue this war. And again, their war is to have political control of Ukraine, and even to, quote unquote, to destroy Ukrainianness, which means to destroy Ukrainians living as Ukrainians, which is why some people talk about genocide in this war.
Which is a very eerie reality that they could face. So the next question may be, what's the way out?
Sadly, the way out is to defeat Moscow on the battlefield. And that's why Ukraine needs more advanced weapons from the United States. If we send them, I think Ukraine would be able to cut the land bridge in the south, which connects Russia through Russian-occupied Donbass to Crimea. If Ukraine did that, all Russian forces in South Ukraine would retreat to Crimea, and Putin won't have an extremely large logistical problem, an expensive logistical problem, supplying his military in Crimea and supplying his civilian infrastructure in Crimea. That's what we should be doing, helping Ukraine achieve that objective.
It must be
Moscow to the peace table.
Pardon me. It must be incredibly frustrating for Vladimir Putin to see how quickly and resilient Ukraine is to reestablish its infrastructure. You've got these rolling blackouts. Every time that they're hit with another strike, they're able to get things back online pretty quickly, even more than a year into this. That has to be tough for Putin to see.
It's very difficult. His strikes on infrastructure and civilians was a direct result of his failures on the military side. It's the fact that his army is not winning. But his objective was to freeze the Ukrainians out and force them into submission this winter. The winter's just about over. That has failed.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.